Hello and welcome. You join us this afternoon at Toynbee Hall, an organisation that's been working to create a fairer and happier society since 1884. As the lead organisation of Debt Free London, it's the perfect host to launch our latest report, Tackling Debt in a Time of Crisis. Debt Free London is a unique partnership of charities that's been working together since 2006 to offer free and impartial advice to Londoners with a debt or money worry. I'm delighted that this partnership includes local citizens' advice bureaus, law centres and independent advice agencies to offer some of London's most vulnerable residents a truly holistic service. Over the past 12 months, we've helped over 23,000 Londoners with free, face-to-face advice and made real progress in the way that we run our community-based services. Today's report takes a look back at how we've been helping and what we've been learning. Take a look.
Debt Free London is a unique partnership of 21 charities led by Toynbee Hall and funded by the Money and Pension Service that provides free, expert advice to Londoners with problem debt. Our trained and accredited advisors support Londoners with all types of money worries, from rent and council tax arrears to credit card and catalogue debt. We work with clients to prioritise their bills and debts, helping them to write letters and advocating on their behalf. We've been hard at work for 14 years, but never has our support been needed more than now, as our city reels from the impact of the coronavirus crisis. Over the past 12 months, we have helped 23,732 people with their problem debt, 80% of whom said they worry about money quite often or all the time. The majority of our clients last year were female, and their average age was 46.8 years old, a slight increase on the average age of the previous 3 years. Around half of our clients identify as white British or black British African, and certain ethnicities are disproportionately represented in comparison to the general population of London. For the 5th year in a row, we've also seen an increase in the number of clients responding, prefer not to say, when asked about their ethnicity. This is now the 3rd most common response, at 20.5%, up 176% since 2015, and follows a similar worrying trend in incidents of hate crime related to religion or race. The most common types of debt we help with remain council tax bills, rent arrears, and credit or store card loans. Both council tax and rent arrears are priority debts, which can have serious consequences for the individual, including the threat of bailiffs, homelessness, or even imprisonment. Before the coronavirus crisis, there were already 1.4 million Londoners facing problem debt, and some London boroughs had the highest rates of child poverty anywhere in the country. Now, with the crisis still unfolding, these shocking figures are set to soar. Already, we're seeing the worsening of previously existing trends. For instance, 92% more clients looking for work or registered unemployed, 24% more families with rent arrears, and 21% more people under 30 in urgent need of our help. Sadly, as in any crisis, we're also seeing a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable members of society, those in low-paid, insecure jobs, those in the poorest parts of London, and especially Black, Asian and other minority communities. It's now clear that poverty and inequality have demonstrably worsened the impact of the pandemic, and we believe they'll continue to do so in the months ahead. Working from the safety of home is not an option for many low-paid employees in supermarkets, hospitals and the transport sector, and a disproportionate number of these frontline workers come from Black, Asian and other minority communities. As we look ahead to the future and brace ourselves for hugely increased demand, our priority is to ensure we're accessible to every single person who needs us. We're piloting new ways in which people can reach us. For instance, through video advice kiosks in local community centres designed for those who don't have access to technology at home or are not tech-savvy enough to use it on their own. We've also launched our new budget planner, which uses open banking technology and online credit reference agencies to instantly check the extent of a client's debt and give advisors the full story of their income and expenditure. Now, more than ever, We need these kind of improvements to cope with the ongoing crisis and reach the thousands of Londoners facing a frightening and uncertain future. Debt advice services and community partnerships like ours can play an essential part in this. But if we're to go even further and stop people falling into debt in the first place, we need to forge new alliances and trial new ways of working with City Hall, local authorities, housing associations, as well as with those in the voluntary sector. We owe it to all the Londoners who have made such enormous sacrifices over the past few months, and to all the frontline workers still risking their lives daily. That's why we're doing everything we can to build a better, fairer society and ensure families can thrive in the future, free from debt and the constant worry it brings.
As you saw there, before the pandemic there were already 1.4 million Londoners facing a problem debt, and some boroughs had the highest rates of child poverty anywhere in the country. We're already seeing the worsening of previously existing trends. For instance, 92% more clients looking for work or registered as unemployed, 24% more families with rent arrears, and 21% increase in people aged 13 under seeking our help. You also heard how we had to close our face-to-face advice centres and adapt our service to continue to support those with money worries. Just 10 days after the first government lockdown, we launched our omnichannel platform to advisors across the service, allowing clients a single access point to our advice, whether it be by phone, WhatsApp, video call or web chat. I'm delighted to share that since we launched this platform in the summer, our advisors had over 7,500 conversations with clients about their finances. This is a fantastic achievement, and I really want to thank my teams for adapting so quickly so that we were able to continue to support those that needed us most. More recently, we've also been piloting new video advice kiosks. These are simple to use and designed with those who might not be able to access our digital channels from home. The first 4 locations have been identified, and we're excited to be partnering with Citizens Advice Islington, Tower Hamlets Carers Centre, St Luke's Community Centre, as well as Toynbee Hall. We have high hopes for these new digital kiosks and are talking with several pan-London organisations to identify additional suitable locations. If you work for an organisation that supports clients and could benefit from one of these kiosks, we'd really love to hear from you. Looking to the future, we know that some of our biggest challenges lay ahead. Today's report suggests an increased demand for debt advice of up to 300% in the next 12 months, which is why we've been taking the time to dramatically expand our team and recruit an additional 70 trainee debt advisors this year. Partnership working has been at the heart of our DNA since the service was established in 2006. And to tackle the challenges we face in the future, we all need to work closely with even more organisations. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we've partnered with Hyde Housing and Notting Hill Genesis, as well as Reventus and White & Co enforcement agents. All of these are forward-thinking organisations who care passionately about being able to provide free, independent advice to their residents and clients. Before I introduce you to our panel for an expert discussion about today's report, it's my pleasure to introduce Debbie Weeks-Bernard, the Deputy Mayor for London for Social Integration, Mobility and Community Engagement.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, please accept my apologies for not being able to attend this afternoon's event in person. It's so important, particularly in the current context, to keep shining a light on the important issue of problem debt. As such, I'm really grateful to Debt Free London for putting this event on and for the opportunity to provide the foreword for their latest impact report, which provides a stark reminder of the challenges we will face over the coming months. It also demonstrates how we can work together effectively and in innovative ways to ensure that Londoners facing financial difficulty have the support they need to overcome it. Since the outset of the pandemic, the Mayor and I have been trying to dispel the myth that coronavirus is a great leveller. In fact, the opposite is true. The virus has instead ruthlessly targeted those already facing inequalities or living in precarious situations. This is particularly true of the economic impact of the virus, which has disproportionately affected younger and older Londoners, women, disabled people, migrants and Londoners from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. It's also hit low-income Londoners hard, forcing many to dig into hard-earned savings, borrow from friends or family, or turn to credit just to put food on the table or keep a roof over their heads. What concerns me the most is that these groups of Londoners were already far more likely to be struggling with debt prior to the pandemic, and their situations are only likely to deteriorate without additional financial support from the government. Despite the recent extension of the Job Retention Scheme and the introduction of the COVID Winter Grants Scheme, many Londoners face an uncertain and distressing winter as they look ahead to the potential cliff edge in April, when the temporary increases to universal credit, the furlough scheme and the extension to eviction notice periods come to an end simultaneously. While we hope to see further government U-turns on extending this support in the coming weeks and months, the situation as it stands brings into sharp focus the importance of doing everything we possibly can at a local level to support Londoners at risk of financial hardship. That's why it reassures me to see some of the incredible work that has been going on through the Debt-Free London Partnership over the past year, and the innovative approach they've taken to adapting their services to both overcome the challenges of the pandemic and tackle some of the long-standing barriers that many face in accessing support and advice. This really is a shining example of how to work effectively in partnership to create a unified service which is easy to find, understand and access for those who are struggling to get by. The tens of thousands of Londoners who benefit from their services every year is clear evidence of this. As such, supporting, fostering and learning from collaborations like Debt-Free London will be an important aspect of our collective effort to rebuild a genuinely effective safety net through the work of the London Recovery Partnership, and I'm delighted to say that Jim Minton will be playing a key role in this effort. Once again, I'm so very sorry that I couldn't attend the event today in person, but myself and my team look forward to working with many of you over the coming months to support this fantastic partnership and the advice sector more broadly. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your kind words of support. It's now my pleasure to introduce our expert panel of panellists to reflect upon our report. Joining me socially distanced in Toynbee Hall are Zahid Ahmed. Zahid is a Debt-Free London trainee advisor and joined the team in June 2020. Jim Minton. Jim's the Chief Exec of Toynbee Hall and leads partner of Debt-Free London. Jim has been Chief Exec here since October 2017 and has a career spanning over 20 years of strategic leadership across public and non-profit sectors. Alison Lamb. Alison is the Chief Executive of RCJ Advice and Citizens Advice Islington, a delivery partner of Debt-Free London. RCJ Advice is the national citizens advice service that provides free legal advice in person, appearing on the High Street Court of Appeal based at the Royal Courts of Justice and Central London Family Court. Her team of lawyers deliver bankruptcy and complex debt advice for court users and over recent years have devised other legal services such as flows to meet the needs of disadvantaged people and communities. The Debt Service for Citizens Advice at Islington are one of the first Debt-Free London partners to be rolling out our video advice kiosks that you heard of in our video. They'll ensure that clients who do not have smart devices at home can still access face-to-face advice during the pandemic. And joining us remotely, Gareth McNabb. Gareth is a social innovation lead at Nationwide Building Society and is an experienced leader in the business, charity and social sectors with a growing portfolio of responsibilities and a strong track record in combining the strengths of these sectors in developing innovative and collaborative approaches to social business issues. Gareth is also a trustee of Community Money Advice, the charity partner that Debt-Free London's commissioned to deliver our Level 3 training to our 70 new trainees this year. And he's also recently completed a secondment with the Open Banking for Good organisation. Also joining us remotely is Muna Yazin. Muna was one of the founding members of the team to launch Fair Finance, London's largest social and ethical lender. In 2010, Muna oversaw the creation of Fair Finance's subsidiary charity, Found Money Advice, one of our delivery partners, and is responsible for the running of the charity and its strategic growth and direction. She currently sits as a challenge group member on the UK Strategy for Financial Wellbeing on affordable credit and on the DCMS BAME stakeholder group chaired by Baroness Barron in response to COVID-19 and its disproportionate impact for BAME communities. Carney Candu. Carney is a sector support executive in the debt strategy and policy team at the Money and Pension Service, the funders of Debt-Free London. Carney is an accredited money advisor and a debt relief audit intermediary who was running a debt advice team for citizen advice in Thanet until moving to the Money and Pension Service at the start of 2020. She's now working to support the coordination of the UK strategy for financial wellbeing with a particular personal interest around advisor wellbeing and recruitment. Carney has most recently been working on, alongside the Advice Services Alliance, to look at the need to recruit younger advisors into the advice sector, culminating in the research report, Building the Younger Generation of Advisors. And finally, but by no means least, joining us remotely is Tamina Sadiq. Tamina is a Debt-Free London debt advice supervisor and joined the team in May 2020. She continues to assist clients who are in debt, as well as supporting our partner organisations to provide high quality advice. Tamina has worked in the voluntary sector for over 12 years as a debt advice caseworker and has assisted clients with financial hardship in 2 major cities, including various boroughs throughout London. Thank you for all joining us today. Question 1, as we start to recover from the pandemic, what is the importance of community organisations and partnerships to ensure that all Londoners, but especially those from disadvantaged households, are being supported? Alison.
I think we can't overstate the importance of community organisations. I think they've been absolutely vital during this pandemic. Islington has every single ward in Islington has a neighbourhood which is in the top 20 poorest neighbourhoods in England. And what we have in Islington, we have 8 community organisations who are spread over those areas. They provide access to really vulnerable communities, and they're absolutely vital in what they do. They responded really quickly to lockdown and made sure that residents got access to food and other support. So it's really important that we as an advice provider respond to this pandemic by working really closely with those community organisations. So the pods that Matt mentioned are going to be based in community organisations. And I don't think that's just because we're trying to target people who haven't got access to mobile phones or web or internet at home. It's because those community organisations know the residents. They can spot when there's a change in circumstances. They can spot when there's a change of attitude. And that's why I think it's really important that advice providers and community organisations work a lot closer now in response to what is going to be a very considerable challenge in meeting debt needs.
Thanks, Alison. Mina, you lead one of our delivery partners in East and Central London. What's your take on the importance of partnerships?
Like Alison says, I think they play a crucial role, and I think as the video showed us, people are in vulnerable situations due to circumstances, and community organisations being able to identify early interventions. And I think in those circumstances, there's a duty on all of us to be able to provide information and guidance at those crucial touch points. Too many people think that it's a sign of failure to ask for help, and I think community organisations at a time of crisis. So I think it's important that there is a collaboration. I think that it's important that there are ways that people can focus around consistency of support and guidance and advice. And I think it's also important that people recognise that actually it's not just a transactional, so statutory bodies have a role to play, councils, housing associations, and being able to ensure that there's a layering of specialism, and being able to provide that intervention point seamlessly. And I think where we can start to think about is how we're targeted around that support. So are there ways that we can provide that consistent information and support and guidance through key touch points through that transactional process? So for example, identifying debt services through rent statements or council tax statements, for example, or through a care plan, or if you're working with somebody to provide an employment journey, how do we ensure that people recognise that actually finances play a crucial role in their recovery, and how we ensure that that process is seamless and collaborative?
Thank you, Muna. Tamina, as a debt advice specialist and one of our supervisors, how's your take on how our partnership works together to support this?
I think during the crisis, our concern has been to keep ourselves and loved ones and those around us safe. Our financial well-being is also important. There has always been a well-established link between debt problems and health issues, and I think it's fair to say that no person will go unaffected by this. Our services, as everybody's heard, are embedded within the local communities across London. And most vulnerable people in our society have already disproportionately been affected, and this is reinforcing already existing inequalities. Our clients come to us with a multitude of issues, where problem debt is often linked with issues around health, family, employment, immigration, and housing, and feel a great sense of relief once they have spoken to our advisors. We've always had a holistic approach to debt advice, looking past the presenting issues, which is obviously even more vital now that people have been affected on many levels because of the pandemic. During the previous financial crisis, we saw the government work closely with the financial sector and regulatory bodies, and have seen the benefits of this through the protections that have been put in place. The difference this time, I would say, is that it is a more personal crisis, and the government needs to work with the people and those on the ground working within communities. What we also know is that debt advice pays. Not only does debt advice contribute to health benefits, in particular mental health for those receiving it, which obviously is particularly important as we go through the second phase lockdown, but it also benefits employers through increased productivity, creditors, local governments by reducing their costs and increasing debt recovery. I think we need more engagement and must build strong partnerships across board to help those in need and help heal the community and build our economy.
Thank you, Tamina. Carly, as a member of the Money and Pension Service, let's hear your take on the role of partnerships.
I think MAPS and myself as a whole, we believe that partnerships is so incredibly important, especially with the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment, that, as has already been stated by the other panellists, is that debt is so much more than just one thing. There's so many different aspects to debt, such as mental health, and so it's really important to have that collaboration to give the best service and holistic service to the client. So that's something that we really recognise at MAPS, and that's something that we're really working towards, making sure that we can provide that support to build those partnerships and that collaborative approach to providing a service that's needed. Now, as you've stated as well in your introduction, we have been doing work with the Better Debt Challenge Group, and this is a way that we've been able to get really useful insight from within the sector, and that's something that it's been at the forefront of the opinions that have come in through, that we need that joined up approach in order to have the most effective service for the client, and that's something that we really believe is important, and hope we can continue to build that to ensure that that service is here, not just for now to dealing with this pandemic, but for many years to come for those who need it.
Thank you. And Jim, as Chief Exec at Toynbee Hall, the lead organisation of Debt Free London, partnerships is all very important and at the heart of everything that Toynbee Hall does. What's your take?
Thank you, and thanks obviously to all of the partners and to MAPS for supporting not only this event but the partnership and all we've achieved through this year, and particularly through the tough times of the summer. I agree with everything that's been said about the importance of community organisations. I mean, the essential fact is we're here, we're in touch with people in the community every day, and even through the pandemic, people have done incredible work here at Toynbee Hall and in lots of other organisations to make sure that they haven't just shut their doors and turned away from people. They've actually made sure that they can continue to be there for people. I was chatting to some ladies the other day who were coming in here to Toynbee Hall for safe, social distanced conversation classes that they have, that we've tried to keep going. And one of them just shrugged her shoulders and said to me, I thought life was difficult before all this, But even now, basic things like shopping and health and going to the doctor and getting the kids to school, they're really, really hard. I need someone who can be there to help me. And that isn't about dependency, it's just about having someone in your community that you trust, that you can turn to. And that's what the partnership is about. So I've been so heartened with the quality of the partnership that we have, but also the new relationships that we've developed, so that we can make sure that when people do have financial challenges, and others have said that those don't always immediately appear as kind of, oh, I've got debts. They might be the root of something else, unemployment or health problems or mental well-being challenges or other things, and actually they've got somewhere to turn to. As Debbie said, we've seen the disproportionate impact of people from black and ethnic minority groups and from other vulnerable groups, and it's so important that organisations like ours are there and available to people to turn to. So I'm so pleased with the partnership, and that has to be part of how we rebuild London, with this network of really high quality, well supported community organisations who can help people.
Thank you, Jim. Now, during the pandemic, we've seen lots of changes, but what are the changes we've seen with the types of clients reaching out to our support? Tamina, can I start with you?
Yes, I think our teams are seeing an increasing number of calls from clients who have fallen through the safety net of local social services. So not only do these clients have problem debt, but are in danger of self-neglect and even violence in some cases. We are, where we have safeguarding concerns, we are having to do more by intervening, making appropriate referrals. We are also seeing forever more people in priority debt, such as rent, mortgage, council tax, and increasingly more deficit budgets. This means that people just don't have enough to meet their essential costs, and there is a huge reliance on food banks and local discretionary funds. People's businesses and personal finance is often linked, so we are seeing more self-employed people who have had a substantial reduction in income or even lost all income, struggling to pay their expenses, business expenses, and this is, if they have a vehicle and hire purchase, which a lot of people do in London, that's obviously another challenge they're having. More people are becoming asset rich and cash poor, and unable to maintain the lifestyle that they may have enjoyed. We've also seen an increase in clients who may have been subject to no recourse to public funds conditions attached to their immigration status. Unfortunately, where they've been furloughed or lost their job, and despite this sudden drop in income, they're not able to claim benefits, which obviously at the moment is the only safety net for a lot of families. Obviously, depending on their circumstances, they could apply to have these conditions changed, but this can be a complicated process and a long process. I mean, I know there are calls for these to be suspended temporarily, and we hope this will happen. We are seeing more clients calling in who don't have English as their first language, and therefore requiring assistance through our interpretation and translation services. We are obviously ensuring our advisors and assessors keep pace of all these changes in order to continue to provide our clients with the best high quality and consistent advice across London.
Thank you, Tamina. Alison, do you have anything to add on the types of clients that come into your service?
I mean, I really recognise what Tamina's saying. I think they're very much what we have seen in our service. I mean, I think there's two things I noticed have been trends for the last sort of 6 months. Firstly, there's more people accessing universal credit and finding that change really challenging, because they've moved probably from a low paid job into an even lower benefit and entitlement, and therefore that adjustment, it needs a lot of support. So I would say that's certainly a trend that we're seeing. The other thing that I think is concerning is we've had a massive increase in safeguarding issues for debt clients, and we've noticed, for instance, early on in lockdown there was greater use of alcohol, there was greater use of drugs, there was a dramatic increase in domestic abuse. And so we've had to respond very carefully to a lot of situations and work really closely with the local authority, with social services, to ensure that everybody is safe. So I think that's a trend that has very specifically been related to this period.
Thank you, Alison. Muna, is it a similar story with your advisors at Fair Money Advice?
Absolutely, I completely resonate with what Tamina and Alison have said. Normally people get into debt because of a life change, an incident. So COVID-19 has been a once in a lifetime change, and I think it's hit so many people across so many parts of our society that actually the number of people and the breadth of people that are affected by debt issues or financial issues has increased significantly. But in terms of that broad brush, there are definitely trends that we're seeing that resonate with the issues that have already been brought up by the panelists. I think we're starting initially when the first lockdown happened and obviously the furlough scheme was introduced, there were definitely people that fell out of those gaps. So income issues and access to universal credit, finding access to other areas of support around their income through charitable grants or access to food banks was a major part of the work that our advisors were focused on, so supporting people around that. But we've started to see a lot more younger clients come through the doors, and many of these are affected because they work in the industries that have been so affected by and the interruption of their employment, so hospitality, retail, creative industries. We're also seeing a significant increase in the number of private renters that are accessing our support. Many households are accumulating debt in the private rental sector at a much faster rate. So these are quite significant arrears that are building up, and they're happening much quicker at a rapid rate. So that's very concerning for people. And so we're working with people like Shelter and other organisations to ensure that people have access to quick support when they need that. But we're also starting to see new ways of engagement, which is really interesting. We're seeing clients coming through the doors with higher skill sets and higher capabilities. So Fair Money Advice traditionally has provided support to people who are very vulnerable and have mental health issues and need a bit more support in actually progressing their kind of debt journey. We're starting to see clients who are quite capable, who are able to do a lot of self-help, who just need a bit of guidance and support and around what their best options are. They also expect services to be delivered in a different way. And I think I'll finish off by just saying that we're also starting to see things around two key issues of note. One is around trauma, and Alison mentioned the safeguarding issue. We're starting to see people with significant addiction issues and mental health issues, and who need immediate wraparound support, domestic violence being one of those issues as well. And we're also starting to see things around the need for long-term planning and people's recovery on a longer scale. So once they do get back into employment, how do they ensure that their financial well-being is not affected for many years to come? So this brings additional complexity, but it also about additional resources journey.
Thank you, Muna. And Kani, thinking about money and pension service and what you're hearing from your funded organisations across the country, is what we're seeing in London reflective nationally, or is it slightly different?
I think it's definitely something that seems to be reflective across the UK. I mean, we're very much aware at the moment that we are very much in the middle of the pandemic, and with the forbearance measures as well as the furlough scheme now being extended into obviously spring next year, we're expecting that this could really push the issues back even further. So as much, of course, there are people out there that are really in crisis matters, we're expecting that there's going to be a spike come kind of March, April kind of time next year. Now, one thing that is really ringing true with the other panelists as well is that there seems to be a kind of a different there is a completely different wave of clients that are needing our support. And these are very much around people who have not believed that they're financially vulnerable previously. So these are people that have lost their jobs, and as someone said, sorry, I can't remember who mentioned it, but it was very much an asset-rich, cash-poor problem out there. Now, this is something that we are very aware of, and we are working really hard to make sure that our money guidance content and the pre-arrears advice and information is out there and available for those who need it, who may not previously have been kind of needed to worry about things like that. And that's something that we are very, very aware of. We're also, as I said, because of these forbearance measures have been so effective in helping people, which has been great, we are very much aware that it is possibly masking a problem that is going to come about in the early part and carry on into next year. And that's something that we want to make sure that there's the resourcing available and ready in order to support those clients who most need it. But it's definitely something that isn't just in London, it is a UK-wide problem, and we're constantly getting kind of updated information on that so that we can make sure that we are prepared, and we're working with our funded organisations to make sure that they are prepared in order to support those when they need it.
Thank you. And now we are live on YouTube right now. If you do have a question for one of our panellists, please do submit that in the comments. We have time at the end to ask them your questions. If you have questions relating to your personal circumstances and finance, our advisors are ready and waiting to take your call now. You can call us on free phone 0800 808 5700. Visit our website at www.debtfree.london and start a web chat. Or if you need some video advice, go to debtfree.london/video and our advisors will be more than happy to assist you. Now, looking forward to the future, how can open banking, omni-channel and new tools like our recently launched budget planner help with clients and advisors? Gareth, you work for Nationwide Building Society. How can we use this new tech to really help the client journey?
I think there's two ways that this comes to play, and the first way builds out of the input from the previous panelist to that last question about the changing nature of debt advice clients now and in the coming few months. The fact that there are many more of them than we've been dealing with before in the debt advice sector that in itself isn't necessarily anything new. The demand for debt advice has exceeded supply for many years, and no steady funding settlement has yet come forward to correct that, although I applaud the work of MAPS and others to try and make steps to establish that. But the growing number of new debt advice clients is also, there's not just more of them, they're coming from different parts of society to those that debt advice organisations are used to serving. And so my reflection on this is that within Nationwide, we've seen an increase in universal credit claimants among our current account customers go up by 50%, 250,000 new universal credit claimants within our current account product, more than a third of which we know have never claimed a benefit ever before, and have come from the segment of the financially cushioned, if you take the cushioned, squeezed and struggling segments that MAPS use. Now, these are not only never claimed a benefit before, but are unlikely to have ever thought they would claim a benefit before. But they're heavy digital users at Nationwide. They're heavy multi-channel, omni-channel users at Nationwide. They use digital for some things. They pop in the branch to see the mortgage advisor. They're used to a blended service model from major organisations. And if they're able, when they're able to get over that, I need to get some help, which we know is psychologically hard for anybody in any of those change of circumstances, they're going to come to the debt advice sector with a service expectation. And so things like omni-channel and open banking are going to very quickly, they're going to move from being optimum ways of designing your service and delivering it efficiently. They're going to very quickly become overnight hygiene factors that basically the new clients of 2021 will just expect you to offer. And so my encouragement to any debt advice organisation is, if you haven't already been looking to invest in these areas, catch up quick, because the clients of today, while the test you did last year on who would use open banking, the answers will be different by the clients of today and definitely the clients of tomorrow. But to get into the question, looking to the future, I think open banking and omni-channel can really help meet those service expectations. But I think there are some ways of both optimising current service, I've seen organisations, creditors and debt advice organisations, manage to strip between 10 and 40% of the time of an initial consultation with a client out after using open banking for those clients and customers that can use it, in terms of extracting that bank account data quickly and accurately to begin to build a budget. It doesn't always pre-populate the whole of a standard financial statement, and some of that's to do with the way that we as a steering group designed the standard financial statement, so apologies for that. But what it can do is give the building blocks for that conversation to start. So it can help debt advisors prepare for a session before sitting down with a client. It can help drive a digital interaction with a client. And omni-channel, again, I think that's about meeting the service needs of a new client base in a way that's optimal for a networked organisation. I think it's particularly strong in your own partnership way of working. Clients of today and of tomorrow are going to have the expectation that they can come to Debt Free London and get help, and aren't going to have much truck with, but you were a face-to-face client and you were a digital client. Omnichannel is absolutely essential. What omnichannel doesn't do is necessarily lead to efficiencies in channel shift. When you open up to omnichannel, what tends to happen is the clients who wanted to come to you but couldn't get in now have a way to come in, and so it can lead to helping more people. What it doesn't tend to do is lead to moving clients from one channel to another because it's cheaper for you. What I love about your approach to omnichannel at Debt Free London is that it's based on the client need, not on your operational needs or your cost basis, and that's absolutely the right way to go into both the open banking route and the omnichannel route. So I applaud you.
Thank you, Gareth. Alison, at Citizens Advice Islington, you're one of our first partners, as we said at the beginning, to launch our video advice kiosks. How's that working with your partners, and how's that supporting clients during the lockdowns?
I think the importance of having a pod in a community centre, or now a community centre has got one, or the libraries want them, so we're moving them into libraries as well, is that gives an option where people do not have to travel or don't have to think where to find advice. They find it where they're going for other functions, and I think that's really, really important. I think giving a site that is safe and confidential within a public space is absolutely vital to increasing access, because we're talking about omni-channels, we're talking about shifting, and I think all organisations in the last 6 months have rapidly and radically shifted services, and we're now going through a sense where we're evaluating what works and talking to people to find out what helps them and what they prefer. But I think that something like a pod in a community space or in a library space will be vital to ensuring that those people who are less confident contacting our advice services are able to comfortably see us and be reassured by seeing somebody face to face. So I think it's motivated our staff and our partners, certainly Islington Council and the library service and the community centres are really, really engaged in this, because they have experienced probably frustrations in actually accessing our services over the years. They now see that we're being proactive in engaging with them to meet the needs of the people that we think might be disenfranchised by new methods of IT, because they're not confident or they haven't got the resources to do it. So I think it's going to be really important for us.
Thank you, Alison. And we know we've got lots of people from housing associations and local authorities watching live right now. If you are interested in having some of our digital advice kiosks deployed across your locations, we really would be delighted to hear from you. So please do reach out, and our contact details are at the end there. Muna, your team at Fair Money Advice have already adapted to omnichannel. How has that adaptation happened for your team, and how have they responded to that?
I think it's about providing a service that clients can actually engage with. So obviously during the lockdown, we've all had to pivot to remote services, and necessity is the mother of invention. So lots of clients that you would have traditionally thought wouldn't engage with digital services due to the lockdown have had to adapt and have had to have a very fast learning curve. And it's been using that as a hook to be able to engage them further in continuing that digital journey, as it were. So our advisors are able to provide an omni-channel service. It means that clients can engage when it suits them, how it suits them. And I think one of the key things that is important as we start to think about open banking and using data and technology to be able to improve our services, but also provide a future fit service for our client groups. Because if we're thinking about the changing nature and type of clients, we're finding ourselves engaged in digital in so many other areas of our life, and our clients are used to being able to engage around shopping, food ordering, every other part of their life. So we should be able to ensure that advice services are future fit and can provide a service that people are engaging with, but also understand that actually is instantaneous and they can get the information that they need in the ways that they engage with other services. I think it's about also ensuring that we don't provide two-tier service. So I think the digital kiosks are really important to ensure that people who can't because of access issues or digital literacy issues, that support is provided. Because one of the things that we don't want to do is that technology to then increase the levels of exclusion. So we have to be very careful about making sure, like we have done at Debt Free London, designing from a client perspective rather than from an organisation perspective. But there are opportunities to provide efficiencies for the advice sector. So for example, a lot of our work from our advisors' perspective is very admin heavy. You are information gathering. If there is a way that we speed and precision around the information that we're collecting, and we're also providing that service to clients who are in vulnerable situations and who may not have the bandwidth to be able to collect all of the information that we're asking them to. I think if we can do that through technology, we should definitely explore that. But it's about ensuring that that technology is designed with a user-led perspective, but also lived experience. And one of the things that I'd love to be able to see actually is how we can engage some of our statutory partners, so housing associations, councils. So we're not only collecting the data directly from the clients to be able to build that picture for their debt journey, but also the crucial information that we need from creditors as well.
Thank you, Mina. Now, Sahid, as someone starting a new role during lockdown, how have you found your first few months as a trainee advisor? What have you learned and what's maybe surprised you?
Hi everyone. So I'm going to try to keep this a little bit brief, but I'm going to break down the question. So starting during the pandemic and in the middle of the lockdown was really tough for me, especially because, starting in a completely new field as well. So I was previously a volunteer generalist advisor. So I was working face-to-face with clients and now completely transitioning to remote forms of communication. That took quite a long time for me to get used to and be confident in, as well as my fellow trainees as well. So it took quite a lot of initiative to train myself and through the training programs and materials that we received. And I had to build the confidence to be able to ask our colleagues for help. And the team was very supportive, especially my technical supervisor. And also, I think a lot of other trainees will agree when I say that when I started the role, it kind of felt like I was starting university again almost. I thought that was really nice. It helped us really settle into our role. And yeah, that was really nice. Now, so what have I learned? I'm just going to keep it to a few key things that I've learned. So I've learned that debt does not discriminate. So I think there's a stigma behind the word debt, that low-income households and people on low incomes fall into debt. But however, that is not the case. It can happen in an instant due to a change of circumstance. For example, during the lockdown, a lot of people have become redundant. So yeah, it does not discriminate. Another thing I've learned is that debt itself can leave a very long-lasting effect, both mentally, psychologically, and even physically. So I think we need to focus on that as well as solutions for debt. And a practical thing I've learned So we have something called a confirmation of advice letter that we give our clients at the end of every appointment. It is a detailed piece of document that basically gives all the information and guidance needed for the client to be able to solve their own issue. So I think that's a very important part of debt advice itself, in empowering our clients, giving them the information and guidance for them to be able to help themselves, and also it becomes a reference point for them in the future to fall back on. So they don't need to keep coming back for advice. So I think that's a very key thing that we have, is empowering our clients. And finally, what has surprised me? So I have to confess, I'm not very good at maths, and applying for this role, I had an expectation that when I saw the word debt, that it's going to be about maths and equations and things like that. And I remember having the discussion with my supervisor when I was volunteering. However, it was totally not what I was expected. It's a form of advice that is very holistic and very comprehensive. And I really believe in that. It was not what I was expecting basically. And just to end it off, I just want to say that this role is, I think, very selfless. And I think people that are working as advisors need to be reminded that it is a selfless thing that we're doing. And yeah, it's amazing. All of you are amazing. And yeah, that's everything I wanted to say today. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'll pass it back to Matt.
Great, thank you so much. You're really insightful. And without embarrassing you too much, if anyone is interested in his first few months as a Debt Free London trainee advisor, he's written a fantastic blog on our website at debtfree.london. Do check that out. We're going to pass over some questions that have been coming in as we've been going live. So I have a quick look as we go through. So the first question, how will the Mayor and London office and local authorities be helping organisations like credit unions? Jim, you sit on one of the boards at the GLA and chair that. Do you want to answer that on behalf of Debbie, who couldn't stay for the whole event today?
I'll start. I admit I'm not an expert on credit unions, so maybe Gareth and Muna and others might want to add something on that. But yeah, I think it's really essential that politicians of whatever background, and particularly led by the Mayor in London councils, really set their aims high in terms of how London should recover from this pandemic. And I think actually the strength of things like Debt Free London and our partnership, and the strength of things like the MAPS financial health strategy, and lots of other innovation that's going on in civil society and in local authorities, gives us a good platform to build on. But we really have to set our ambitions to having a much stronger safety net in London for people. So we all knew before the pandemic that people in vulnerable groups were more likely to fall into debt, or to have challenges of mental health, or to have challenges of low employment or poor housing. That's got to stop. We've got to do something about that. We've got to have the political will to change the systemic things that keep people in debt. And also, critically, we've got to have that safety net in terms of advice and support rooted in local communities. So the fantastic work that the Debt Free London partners do, the advisors, the trainees, and everyone associated with that, that needs to be built upon, so we can have a place where people can turn, so they can get what's entitled to them, so they can make the changes in their lives. And I can't emphasize enough how much we need to base that on the experience of people who are going through the challenges. We've heard a lot from Muna and Tonina and Alison about the people who are coming here. We need the people to say how change needs to happen, and we need to listen to their voices and make sure that their experience is driving the change. So using technology, creating new infrastructure, being brave. If the Mayor and others can get behind that, then that's the kind of London we can build, so that people don't have problem debt and we can shape a fairer and happier future.
Thanks, Jim. Muna, Karni, is there anything to add on particularly that question from Mukesh there around how we can partner with local authorities, and particularly credit unions?
Yeah, can I just add to, I think Jim's made a very important point. I think from a political view, I think it's about raising awareness and ensuring that credit unions and CDFIs have the visibility in times of crisis like this. Lots of people are looking for short-term borrowing options, and where they are unaware of credit unions and CDFIs and other affordable lenders, they will naturally be hoovered up by high-cost lenders and payday lenders. So I think there is a political responsibility to ensure that that awareness and that drive affordable lending sector is really driven at a regional, as we're talking about London perspective. I also think there's a collaboration and that partnerships conversation around making sure that credit unions and people like Debt Free London and partner organisations are working together to ensure where advice is needed and it's not a credit issue, that seamless transition from somebody looking for a lending product, but actually what they need is advice. And that kind of handover is done very smoothly and ensuring that people are getting what they need quite quickly as opposed to going to a payday lender.
Thank you, Mina. Carney, is there anything to add from a money and pension service point of view on that and partnerships?
I think it's that just that we completely agree with what's kind of being said and the importance of partnerships with, as you said, the local authorities and making like credit unions and making it more available for people to get to the cheaper credit rather than, it's a perfect term, being hoovered up by these high cost lenders. So I think it's definitely there is a lot more work to be done, and it's definitely on the agenda, and it's something that we want to continue to build on. So it's again, as we said earlier, it's all about collaboration, and that's something that can only get better as we move through this.
Thank you. I had a question coming from Jacob, who says, in both ways, as well as threatening letters, people's anxiety is heightened around guilt about not paying their bills, but how can creditors be influenced not to exploit this? I suppose Gareth and Carney, do you want to share your views on this one? Gareth?
So, for the sector that I work in, and I suppose on this panel represent, I think the level of forbearance being shown in financial services is significant. My personal view is that it's been relied upon by the state in order to provide a quick, rapid response to put a safety net under large parts of society. And that's great. It means a lot of people have got a lot of help, but it does mean that there are people falling through the net. The only way to have a social security for society is to put a social security net under it, and credit and commercial organisations can never be the only answer to that. What we can do, though, is ensure that our conduct towards customers in difficult circumstances is absolutely impeccable, and by offering the payment holidays and flexible forbearance that financial services have wanted to and then been required to, I think there's quite a lot of help available. What I'd love to see is that this awareness of vulnerability being something that can affect anyone at any time, and it just takes a global pandemic to come along to expose the factors in society. My hope would be that even the more forward-thinking creditors like financial services can begin to develop even more flexibility in their products and services and even more understanding in their communication methods. I, for one, fully support the Stop the Debt Threats campaign that a number of charities, including Debt Free London, will have supported to ensure that things like the Consumer Credit Act are amended so that we can even stop sending the default letters in the ways that they're worded. So I think that the leading creditors are absolutely looking to change their approach. There's always more that can be done. My hope would be that other sectors, other regulated areas, and particularly the unregulated sector of government debt can learn from our example and try and keep up.
Thank you. I had another question coming around feedback, and how does Debt Free London take on feedback from clients, particularly regarding kind of digital advice session? Tamina, as one of our technical supervisors, do you want to answer how we pass on feedback and implement that?
I think we, as a supervisor, obviously at DFL, any feedback we get from clients, whether that's on our Trustpilot or we see how our advisors engage with our clients, and we obviously look at how the cases and the issues are being dealt with by our advisors. And we see what's happening across London as supervisor, and I think we are able to sort of help our advisors understand what's needed, what changes might be happening. We do this through workshops, through extensive feedback, when we are sort of having our one-to-one feedback sessions or assessing their work or files. So yeah, I think there is very regular contact with our advisors who are on the front line, and we make sure that this is sort of obviously feeds through, and that we are ensuring the best, highest quality service and making any changes that need to be made and adapting, especially in these difficult times, as well as we can.
Thank you so much. I can see some comments in there regarding subtitles, and I'm sorry we haven't been able to make this available for this live event. We will make sure that subtitles are added and you can re-watch the full event with those turned on shortly afterwards. Unfortunately, we are out of time. It's 3 o'clock, it's gone really quick. Everyone that signed up in advance on Eventbrite will receive our Tackling Debt in a Time of Crisis report, either via PDF or posted out to you if you've requested that. It will be available on our website for anybody else who's joining us live on YouTube now to read the full report, as will the recording of today's event. Thank you to all of my panellists for sharing their expert views, to our advisors across London who have been working so hard and tirelessly throughout this pandemic to make sure we are still here for the Londoners that need it most, and for you for joining us today. We'll see you soon. Thank you.